Hello and welcome to the Film Ireland podcast. I'm Gemma and I'm chatting with director Thaddeus O'Sullivan about his film The Miracle Club. So thank you so much for chatting with us. It's brilliant to get to see something of that scope and scale starring such amazing women on the big screen. I was just wondering if you could tell me a little bit about how this came to fruition. I know it was in development for a long time.
Yes, well, I was first approached in 2006 by HBO, who were looking for a director, and I talked to them about doing it, and it fell through soon after that because of some legal issues that they had, and it disappeared from my life until 2 or 3 years ago. And in the meantime, it had gone off, and various other people had worked on it, writers, directors, producers, whatever. It's quite a history. And so it came to me 2 or 3 years ago. And one of the people who was working on it at that time, Tim Creagh, was a writer that I had worked with on a couple of BBC projects. So that made me get interested again. I liked working with Tim before. And so we worked on the script along with a writer called Laura Mackenzie. So she worked on it for a bit, and she really helped me with certain aspects of the script. And
as an Australian, like with that outside eye.
Yes, I know, but I really did want a woman to take a look at it, and she did help a lot. So. I felt a bit more comfortable having had her had a look at it and come up with some ideas. She came up with some really interesting structural ideas as well, which really helped. But Tim was always working on it. Tim Creagh was always working on it. He was, in a sense, the sort of spiritual side for me, because he was somebody who's very interested in religion and Catholicism, and he was brought up a Catholic, and but he'd also been to Lourdes quite a lot, which I hadn't, and so he had quite strong ideas about Lourdes. That was interesting to talk about that, and the thing we focused on. I mean, every Irish person knows about Lourdes. Irish Catholic has some strain of Lourdes in their world. So Lourdes was an element really in Catholic life, Catholic religious culture, and some of my family went to Lourdes, and I had never gone. But I mean, everybody talked about Lourdes, as you're growing up, and you hear about it, and you know what it means, and there's always an aunt or a cousin or somebody who's going or coming back, and also pilgrimage was interesting. We used to go to Knock. The pilgrimage once a year, and when we were kids we were dragged off to Knock, and so pilgrimage was also part of our as I say, Catholic culture. So I was very interested in the Lourdes thing. So Tim Creagh, he'd been a number of times for personal reasons, and he had quite a lot to say about it, and the thing that really struck us was the idea that when people step out of their lives and go to Lourdes, they confront something that is just about them and about what they believe. And I think it's the effect of seeing so many people around you who are making a spiritual connection, that it does, I suppose, in a sense, rub off, and that you either reject it completely and get back on the plane, or you get caught up in the flow. And so we used to talk about that, and I felt that was our characters were in that. I mean, some of the characters, they really believe that a miracle might happen, and some of them don't. And the ones that, like Maggie Smith character doesn't, and the Linney character, it doesn't. But it has given them that has created an atmosphere for them in which they feel they can engage with a part of their lives which they wouldn't otherwise have done. So a spiritual part of their lives.
It sounds like the script has gone through many different forms then from the original short story. Can you tell me how much changed from the HBO version that was brought to you, and then, like, practically, was there different structure?
Well, I would say
reform it when you come on board.
The sort of 3-act structure was always sort of there, but there was never really a resolve to the that sense of guilt that was in the background. There was the idea of a baby hadn't been born or aborted. We never knew which, and so we had to decide what was the story, the Laura Linney story, what actually happened, and how has she dealt with it. So that was all new, and what effect does she have on the two women? So the Laura Linney character was quite different, as she is now, was quite different, and that was the thing that was missing in the sense from the original story, was that sense of a manifestation of the past that could really take you into the story and have an effect on the other characters. And the thing that really interested me, therefore, was the guilt that the women had felt, but that they completely buried. And it was the atmosphere in Lourdes that allows that to be spoken about. I mean, Kathy Bates' character is very, very angry at the sight of Laura Linney, and the reason she is because it's guilt at what happened in the past, and how she contributed, knowingly or unknowingly, to the Laura Linney character's banishment.
And could you tell me a little bit as well, your relationship with the how do you go through processing the drafts? So do you get like a version of this story, a version of the script, and you'll go back and give notes on it, give feedback, or is it something where you will, sit down in a room, take a pass at a draft? Do you get like maybe a script consultant in to have a look? Because again, it seems to have taken so many different shapes. I'm just more wondering about the process of this coming.
Well, there was. I mean, I hardly got an opportunity to work with it when I first got it. HBO first approached me in 2006. So the period between that and 2 or 3 years ago, I've been told about it, but I haven't really read the drafts. When I got it, I felt that the character, now played by Laura Linney, needed development, the Chrissy character, and that was the one we worked on. And the relationship between the Chrissy character, between Laura Linney character and Kathy Bates' character, was the heart of bringing the past forward, because it was about through Maggie Smith's character, we could focus on the guilt that they had buried, and the reason why the Maggie Smith character had told a lie that caused her son's death, basically, and she has not faced that all these years, and so we clarified that story strand in the drafts that I worked on in the last couple of years.
So it sounds like always being refined for theme, sort of like you bring it back to that sort of processing the past and that kind of spiritual healing on a big level. So like that's very interesting.
Absolutely. So it wasn't just about women who were going to Lourdes looking for a miracle, whatever their miracle was, whether the breast cancer idea or whatever, or the child talking or whatever. It was there was something in the past that needed resolving, and that was the spiritual healing you're talking about. And for me and Tim Creagh, I think it was the idea of how does we saw the idea of guilt from the past just being like an infection that had been that didn't manifest itself until they saw the Laura Linney character, and then the disease broke out, and but they were in the right place to deal with it. That was the other point. Lourdes is a place to deal with that because they left. I saw it as a kind of road movie, where they get out of the house, they leave the husbands, they leave the kids, and they go, and they're going to have a great time. But they've dragged Christy with them, and that's the worm in the bud, and they can't shake it off, and they have to face it.
And like that's really sort of like a wonderful story as well. When you knew it was in the right place, when you finally got that kind of you were like, all right, this is our shooting draft. What is the step that you would go through now to get into pre-production? So, or would this be something that you're working on the whole time? Is this like, once it's there, you get the DOP in, or was the DOP always on board? Do you start working on your mood boards, or was this something that you would have had from pitch level? What's your kind of process then, or are you doing everything simultaneously while working on the funding as well?
Well, I mean, it obviously varies from project to project, and there is a process, that you follow, and all of that, and it's so there's a packet of money there, and there's a 90-page or 100-page script, whatever it is,
and a bunch of different funders as well.
Well, we had about six or seven different funders, so it was a classic independent films finance structure. With the tax credit systems and all that. And so you have this pile of money and you have the script, and how do you get them to fit? So there's the ambition of the script and the director who wants to, this is what he wants to create. And then you have the producer saying, this we can create and this we can't. So that's the kind of conversation you have in the very early stages. And a good example of that was the grotto. How do we create Lourdes? And that was like a terrible. They're just terrible discussions because there were all kinds of cheap and cheerful alternatives proposed for the grotto, which I absolutely refused because I thought if I can't build a grotto, I'm not making the film. So and I said that to anybody who would listen. The endless meetings we had about the finance and that was going to be a big expense and all the rest of it. And so everybody worked towards that. Okay, we've got to build a grotto, and then we're going to need CGI to extend the grotto and put us in a context of architectural context of Lourdes, and then we're going to need something else. Do we have good library shots of good quality from angles that we think will work for our story? And so I storyboarded that. So I got a storyboard artist, and we storyboarded that. So I was able to go to my producer and investors and say, this is what we're going to build, and this is how we're going to extend it and make it look, and put it in the context of architectural Lourdes, and this is what it's going to cost. And then we costed it. So that was the process, Lourdes. The other process was fairly standard. We had to decide whether we want to build all those interiors or whether we could do it on location. And the problem with working class homes like that, terrace houses, is, we did shoot in one room in that square that we used, but it was a tiny interior, and we only needed one angle, so we got the interior stroke exterior relationship sorted out. It's when the priest comes to give her the ticket, and when the Stephen Rea character is shouting about the ticket, we see her going in and out. So we used a small interior there. Other than that, we built all those sets. Mm-hmm. That actually was, also we have to think of the cast. A cast like that, in particular with Maggie Smith, because we were very limited on the time that we could use her in the day and the days we could use her in the week. So we had strong limitations on that. So that meant that we had to think about how we were going to schedule her and how the locations fitted that. So if we were going to use a real location, we would have less control over Maggie's schedule. If we have a set, we can pop in and out of the set to suit Maggie's schedule. So there's that kind of thing. And
you can leave all the equipment there, and it's purpose built.
Yeah, once you're on a set, then you have a block, and if like Maggie was available 3 days a week, and only 2 successive days. So we would have her for 2 successive days, then we'd have a gap, and then we'd be able to use her again for another day. So if we had a studio with 3 or 4 different sets, yes, we could pop onto one set while Maggie was off, and then could pop back onto it again when she came back on again. But having said that about Maggie, she was working 12-hour days. She was in makeup at whatever it was, 7 o'clock, and she didn't get home till 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. She was extraordinary. She never ever said to me, "I've had enough," or "I'm tired," or whatever. She was an absolute powerhouse, and she was. Anyway, that's Maggie. That process. So we built the sets, the interiors in Ardmore, and we had built the grotto in Ardmore, and then in post production we extended the grotto or the cathedral and basilica.
And the overall production design is just absolutely stunning. How do you, was this always the vision you had in mind, or was that something that you'd feel out when you're chatting with the production designer and the DOP? When does the look become more fully formed?
So the big decision for me was, you talked earlier about the development of the script. So when I can't remember when it was set. I think it was set in a later period, but I set it earlier, mid-60s, because that's a period I thought was a good transition in terms of Catholic Ireland. There was something, and the economics of the country were beginning to change then, and I thought it would be a nice period to set. But also it was a period I knew very well, and I grew up in a working class home, and I left it in 1966, so it was like frozen in time for me. But it wasn't just about me. It was about that period in Ireland. I thought was a nice time. So once we had decided on that, that was a look that we now had to. How do we dig into that? And so John Hand and I would talk about, and with the costume designer, we'd talk about the colour, and we'd look at stuff, and we were quite surprised at how much colour there was. Our memory of that period actually was, coming from working class home, Christian Brothers schools, violence in the school, and it wasn't a great period, to be honest. None of us really felt that. It was interesting, and when we started to sort of go into it, we thought, that's a lot of colour around. And then we thought, well, let's have some fun. Let's go with those wallpapers, those cushion covers, and stuff on the wall. Let's have some fun with it. And a bit of a release for us, that actually. And, there is comedy in the film. It is very humorous, as well as has its dark emotional moments. And so it needed to have a bit of a lift. And so we didn't shy away from those bold wallpapers and like I say, heavily embroidered cushion covers and stuff like that. And there's a lot of detail. I mean, I'll just give you one example of the kind of detail that John Hand was brilliant at, working from the ground up. Laura, Linney, Kathy Bates and I were looking at one of the sets one day. I was just taking her around the set. I don't think it was finished. And she was saying, oh, this is great. This is my home, walking into the kitchen. And then we stopped and we looked at the door frame. And what John had done was he'd written all those marks as if the kids had been marked throughout the years with a biro mark, a pencil mark on the door jamb, all the way up. And the kids in her story, the grandkids, they were older kids, but they'd gone. And then there was the grandkids. And you're never going to see that on camera. And Kathy Bates melted when she saw that, because she thought, these people are just taking this so seriously. I'm gonna. Not that she wasn't, but she was very, very relaxed to see, and she was totally in love with John Hand from that day onwards. That kind of detail an actor really appreciates, even if it's not going to be on camera. They know that people are thinking in the right way, and because these actors, the reason that they are as brilliant as they are is because they have an unerring instinct for what it is they can do to make this character come to life. And there's only so many rehearsals and whatever blocking and the director can do to bring that out. And speaking of that, I found they just have done so many films. I found it not a challenge working with them. I found that they would just walk into a room, and the blocking was deadly easy, and which is just as well, because we were on a very tight schedule, and we rehearsed a bit and do a few takes, and that'd be it.
And tell me about, like, again, the cast are unbelievable. Like, even to have like a caliber of that, like the absolute A team. Was anyone attached before you came on? Did you have to sort of like kind of prove yourself to come to this independent project? Because I mean, these are all people that are working with like top level studios all the time with loads of money that they can probably ask for, like, you know, just a plate of blue M&Ms to be brought to them on a whim. How do you sort of go, this project is worth it and you can trust me? Or is that like a relationship that you had built, or is that something that you find?
Well, first of all, Maggie Smith was attached many years ago, and before I came on, and I think she was, and then Kathy Bates came on again before my time. So it was a question of whether they wanted to work with me, and I didn't talk much to Maggie. We had a lunch, and I talked to her about what I was planning. I had long conversations with Kathy Bates on the internet, on Zoom. We were working on the script, but we were also working on the language, and I had a voice coach a dialect coach who was working with her on the accent, and so I was working with them at that stage. And they could still decide whether they didn't want to do it. They were attached doesn't mean they're committed, and so we developed it with them, keeping them up to speed on the changes to the script. Some they liked, some they didn't like, and so we worked through that. And then when I felt that the Laura Linney, the Chrissy character, was something that we could really put out to offer, we sent it to Laura Linney quite late in the day, and she came on board straight away. She loved the character, and she wants to work with Maggie Smith.
And she's someone who's kind of known not to take a weak character as well. Like she's someone who, again, is infamous for that, which is amazing. That, like, you know, I love to see her in things, and she brings such intensity to things. It's so exciting to see her, you know, kind of play that disruptor role in this. It's beautiful to watch. A little bit like these are very different cultures that people are coming from, and this is your world that you're bringing them into, and you're like, these are women that we know, we know them here. Culturally, how do you bridge that divide when creating that world, like building it from that ground up?
Well, the first thing is so with the Laura Linney character, so we looked at it this way. I don't want her to change her accent. We have to. She's going to convince us in the performance that she has rejected Ireland, that she has been banished, and she has made a life for herself. So she embodied that distance and that separation from her past, and she also exuded the mystery of what happened, and that, you know, we originally had a lot of dialogue, expositional about the past to explain that. I mean, we just cut all that out, and some of it actually survived right till almost the final cut, and finally we got rid of that even then, and that because the Laura Linney tells you so much in her performance, the kind of thing that you just talked about. Strip away so much stuff, and you're left with a character who fascinates you, intrigues you, and so at the point where audiences just need a bit more information, then you drop it in, and it takes them, you know, a huge leap on that small piece of information, because she has created this mystery, this intrigue, well, not really mystery, this intrigue that the audience follow her and want to know more. And then you
have this conversation with Laura directly? This is something that you would discuss at length, or did she understand that from the page?
So on Zoom, I would have talked to Laura about the character and what I thought the character was, and she would say, "Okay, I've been thinking about it, and these are the notes I've made, these thoughts for myself, and I'll go through them with you." And she would go through these thoughts related to the script, and not related to the script, just related to herself and who she thought the character was, and what we were going to do for her, what she was going to do for the story. But it was interesting, she never got bogged down in too much detail about what the character had done. She focused on the word banishment. That was a big thing for her. That banishment in those circumstances was something that she worked on, and what would the character have gone through, having suffered that, and the consequences of that banishment at such an early age. And so Laura thought her way into this character at quite a deep level, which is an actor thing. It's not a director thing. And I think, I was talking to RTE the other day about Michael Gambon, because I knew him very well when he died. And Michael was famous for never talking about his work. You just come there and be bothered with that. I don't do any research, and he was always very throwaway. And on the radio, they played during the interview. There was three of us on the interview. They played an interview that he did with Marion Finucane, and in it, Michael talks in quite an abstract way, but for him, an intellectual way, which he always would never, a way in which he would never normally talk. And he talked about the instinct as an actor. There's only so much you can learn, but you read the script and you get a sense of the character, and something in you goes click, and you get a sense of what that character is, and you know where you're going with it. You don't really need, what you need from a director is when they're blocking, it's about mise en scène, and it's about what additional things can the director add to this character in the way that he presents it. And Michael was very, very good, just going back to Michael and acting, and he suddenly talked about it in a way which, and I thought, that's not dismissive of saying it's all easy. He's actually pinpointing something. Though it sounds abstract, it is utterly clear to me that he's trying to talk about something that actors have that is unique to them. And I think Laura, you say in her, she had this sort of beat sheet, if you like, and she knew where she would be in any scene. Every actor has to think about that, of course, because you're shooting out a sequence, so they need to know where they are. It's the director's job to say, this is where you are in the scene, but mostly they don't need that. They know it, and then you make adjustments accordingly, when you're blocking it. But Laura had a very, very clear and very deep understanding of this character. And so when anybody said anything to this character, she had a very, very specific reaction. Having said that, she really threw me, because she could say, at the beginning, she said, okay, I'll tell you the way I work. She said, I want to give the director the most opportunities in the cutting room, because I'm a director's actor. This is for you. Okay, she said. So what I'll do, I'll give you options. You don't even have to talk me through them. I'll just give you options. You can just say, do another take, and I'll try out different things, and I'll see. So we have two slightly opposing things there. One is that she's very clear about how the character is going in her head, and how it should be played in each scene on the one hand. On the other hand, she's saying to the director, I'll give you different options. And she would, not always, but quite often she would try something a little lighter, a little heavier, a little this, a little that. and she'd give you those options. But obviously, she felt in her mind that they were within they all would work within the decision she had made about that.
Do you find you go in there and you're like, oh, the energy isn't matching? Oh, do we have anything else? Like, do you find that?
No,
yeah,
no, not at all. She was, she was brilliant in
or just having those options. Did that help? Like as a director, when you do go into the cutting room, is that?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And sometimes after a few takes, I would say, well, look, can we do another take on that option? I like that. I've got those other two, but let's develop that one a little bit. And that was a very easy language to communicate in. And we would try out a couple of things, and then we'd move on. And in the cutting room, then I'd know, what she's very, very much a director's actor. She wants to tell the story, and they're all brilliant storytellers. And that's what they do. And that's all they're interested in.
And make it truthful. Like, that's the thing. And people go, oh, it's so easy. But, like, it's the hardest thing in the world because there's a truth that they know. It's amazing. And, like, again, the caliber of women, like, it's just, and their chemistry. What was it like, maybe, even again, I think, like, Kathy and Maggie's, the world that they come from is so different as well to Ireland. You know, like, again, we have such a kind of weight, a silence over everything, and they do embody it in this very, very well. But was that something you had to translate to them going over, or did they just understand it? I mean, Maggie's across the pond.
It was mostly to do with the habits of people like that, and the language, not just the accent, but the way that the language was used. I mean, particularly Jimmy's language. It was the language of the Dublin street working class. And you can get into the whole, fucking gobshite sort of, all that rhetorical stuff. If somebody who's non-Irish starts to use that, that's when it really rings untruthful. You've got to get rid of all that and focus on a simpler rhythm rather than constantly replaying the Dublin argot. It's you've got to find the truth in the sentence and not be distracted by the colour of the language. And so that's why the sets were very important. And for, let's say, for Kathy, moving around the set and the kitchen and the holy water, the blessing herself, and all those movements. She worked really hard on those, and all those actors are very good on doing things at the same time.
And knowing what hand they're in. That's what amazes me. I'm like, how do you know?
Yes, and they're brilliant at that, and so it's no time wasted. But it's to get inside the cultural thing, to feel relaxed in the rhythm of the dialogue and the rhythm of the home, or with the kids, and Kathy would just work so hard on that, and then when she'd got it right, she'd absolutely light up, and she'd just be kissing everybody, and she'd really feel that she'd crack something, and again, it was just the work ethic was quite amazing, and they all work very differently, as all actors do. None of the two actors are the same. And when Kathy and Maggie and Kathy were together in scenes, it was just fantastic.
But again, I think even the dialogue, even the physicality, it's almost like a symptom of who the person is. And these are sort of women that have gone through this very tough life. And I'm just wondering, like, is that like a shorthand that you'd have with them? Like, is this something, again, that you'd have this big, long discussion about where they've been or what they've done? Or is this something that they'd kind of come to themselves and bring with Maggie and Kathy particularly?
Well, like I say, the cultural thing, we'll have to go through that pretty carefully. Maggie said to me one day when we were doing something that was to do with rosary beads or religion or something, she said, do we have an advisor on the set? And I said, you're looking at him. I know all this. And, what's the question? And I think it was to do with rosary beads and the decades of the rosary or something, how you held them or something. I forget now exactly. But there was nothing I couldn't tell her in relation to that. but also she's surrounded by the crew, or the crew would know all that as well, and we were kind of reigning experts, and so an actor just needs to feel comfortable that they understand that they're not going to feel silly or look silly, and then the rest is the meaning, and that is in the literal performance, and so they will. I think it's a step process. With Kathy, it was the language first, but we worked with her for 2 or 3 months before we shot, and so she was getting in that way. So we would send her videos and sound stuff, and and she'd read stuff. So she was getting acculturated.
So what has the reaction been so far to people watching it? Has there been many eyes in it? I know the release is next week, but at preview screenings or festivals or anything like that, have people resonated with it? Because it seems like something that we've such an expat, like we've so many expats around the world as Irish people, that there's a real shorthand.
Yeah, I think just thinking about the screening last night, the Irish audience fed off one another in recognizing aspects of our culture at that time, either from memory or to learn, and that was interesting. And that's obviously, when we were screening in America, you don't get that. But what they're interested in America, I found, was they're very interested in the spiritual aspect of it, hope, reconciliation. Very little talk about guilt, which was very important to me in the Irish context, and but that sense of a confessional thing they were very interested in, and
the baptism elements as well. There's the
water, and they what I always worried about was the mix of comedy and drama. And so it didn't feel bifurcated and like 2 films trying to be one, and I think that works. Listening to the audience and talking to people, I get a sense that, and we were conscious of this at the time. In the last act, it's a lot for the audience to take on. It's a lot of drama, and the comedy and the sentiment at the end is like a release, and so I think we got those beats right. Drama, comedy, release, whatever.
Because it heightens it as well.
Sorry,
it heightens it, and it heightens those lows. You hide. You kind of like when you're going through it, instead of like when something is one note. I think you get to.
Oh yeah,
like,
and I've done that in the past. So I've worn myself off that. And you need change.
And that's it. And this film has plenty of heart and humour. So thank you so much for chatting with us. That was amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.